Hello, everyone. My name's Justin. Some of you probably know me from this series already, but I want to welcome you to a very special webinar today. Before we get started, I want to go through some housekeeping items. So there's a question box to the right. Feel free to type in your questions at any time throughout the chat today, and we'll do our best to get them answered. We have folks on hand answering those questions via chat, so just because it's pretty hard to answer them, as we talk a lot of the time. But if we don't get to you before the end of the webinar, we'll reach out directly after to make sure you get them answered. You can also download the presentation in the handout section, as well as a few extra goodies over to the right. And as soon as the webinar recording becomes available, we'll email you the link. So we hope you consider sharing that out and letting other people know. So kind of with that out of the way, I want to introduce our very special webinar guest today. We have Tom Reber. A lot of you probably know who he is. But if you don't, he's an entrepreneur, business coach, podcaster. Let me think. He's got a huge long list of accolades. So founder of the Contractor Fight, Contractor Sales Academy, and HGTV host, which I think is streamable on like Discovery Plus now. But he's helped hundreds of thousands of home services contractors grow and maximize the profitability of their business.
How are you doing? Great. Today, thanks for having me.
No, I'm very happy and grateful that you decided to hop on with us today. So I appreciate it. You run a lot of content weekly. If you guys haven't seen it, I encourage you to look it up, especially if you're watching and you're in any sort of home contracting business. Tom speaks to everything from growth tips to getting out of your own way to maximizing profitability and margins. And if you know what the contractor fight is, those words, Tom really refers to those words as the fight between your ears. So the things that contractors struggle with mentally that causes them to sort of struggle in business and things of that nature. It leads to things like not charging what they're worth and having self-doubt or not fully realizing their self-worth. Tom could obviously speak to it way better than I can, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an insight there too. He's got podcasts all over you can download, look at. Runs a thing called the Battleground, which is hugely beneficial if you're looking for ways to really level up your business. Won't do the whole time plugging Tom's stuff, but I wanted to at least let you guys know, if you don't, who you're listening to and why you should pay close attention today. But we're just going to keep this very candid today. We're not going to run through a big slide deck or anything fancy. We're going to keep it more organic and just go more flow to flow with questions and kind of go from there. Does that work for you, Tom?
I'm all in. Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. Appreciate it. You're never not all in on something, which is good. So you're 100% or out probably. Yeah. But so I guess I want to start out. We get a lot of questions from our users and from our audience around like, hey, I'm seeing success in my business. Like it's growing, but it's kind of plateaued, right? I've hit that 5 million, that 10 million, whatever it is mark, and I can't seem to break through that ceiling. What advice would you give folks like that to how do you continue that sustained growth and how do you keep your business growing and flourishing as it continues to grow?
No, that's a great question. So a lot of people, they do plateau. And I think it comes down to two things. Certainly there's subtopics of these two things, but and let me just set the expectation. My voice is a little fried today because my daughter, one of our daughters' soccer team they won their semifinal last night. They're playing for the state championship next Tuesday. And I was screaming my head off last night at the game. So I actually fried my voice. So if you guys hear me, clear my throat or something, that's what's going on. So, I think first and foremost, when a business plateaus, the first place I try to revisit with somebody is let's get back to your dream and your vision. A lot of times when we don't see that continued growth, it's because we're not familiar enough with what we want. We're not familiar enough with the dream, the vision that we have, because there are so many other things in business and life that can steal our attention. And we end up focusing on problems and issues and people things and this and that. So I would encourage anybody to make it a daily practice to just keep your eyes on what you want. And what I found is every level of success that you have creates new vision for where you can go. And if you're not in the habit of continually looking in that vision, because our brains, our actions, all those things are going to be pulled towards what we're most familiar with. Okay. So if I'm most familiar with the struggles and the problems, and maybe right now you can't find people, right? And if you're just focusing on that, you're going to be drawn to getting more of that. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, when a business plateaus, many times, and what one of my coaches has said to me I'm stealing his phrase, and he gave me permission, so I can do that. Because I think it's said beautifully, is when we plateau, we're often seduced by success. We might have a record year and then think we've arrived. And we get away from those daily habits, those daily actions, those non-negotiables that got us to where we are in the first place. So if you find yourself stuck right now, I would start there. And then the third thing that I believe is huge is my CEO and I were talking recently that there's up, and I'll say it's the, you said 5-10 million, somewhere in there, they're plateauing. It's different for every industry and every business, but there's a saying that if you want to grow your company to 10 employees, let's just talk employees right now. If you want to grow your company to 10 employees, you need to delegate the things that you're weak at. Okay. And if you want to grow to 50 employees, you need to delegate the things you're strong at. And so I think a lot of people, they get stuck at that 5 or 8 or 10 million mark because they really haven't come to terms with, I need to let go of even the things I'm really good at. And that means raising up other leaders. It means being more of I think there's a point in time where you become more of a recruiter than anything else. And so I believe, the success that you want to get past that plateau that you're at is most likely rooted in those three things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that last saying. I'm not gonna steal it and reuse it, but I'm
Steal
definitely
it.
gonna refer
Steal
to
it, man. It's all good. But
yeah, I love that thought process though, because it's easy to delegate things we're bad at. Because I'm bad at a lot of stuff, definitely, and I very much am not good at it. So I just let other people handle it. They're much better at it than me. But to be able to grow things and keep growing things, you've got to be willing to let go of that control. Because you can't do it all. You can't run a $50 million company if you're doing all that. So even if it is your strength, like, you got to have other people still strong at that too, because it takes an army, to lead.
Yeah. And if you think of, letting go of the things that you're good at, if you don't do that, you're still stuck. Like I said, the first thing, we're not familiar with where we want to go. And so we put our focus to being in the weeds. So like right now in the contractor fight, over the past year or so, I've been more and more letting go of the sales role, for our programs and our workshops and things like that, because it was just, quite frankly, it was just easier. People want to talk to me. And I think that it's like that with any business, right? The owner's selling and people want to deal with the owner. And so we've been really intentional about getting other people on our team involved with sales and things like that, and marketing and this and that. And what that's done is it's allowed me to move my eyes to where I want to go and not where we're at right now in the day-to-day operations of ringing the cash register every day in the area of sales.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant point. And I have a friend in the home improvement industry, runs a fencing company specifically, and he told me recently that he transferred out of his CEO into a CEO, like chief vision officer is kind of what he named himself. He's like, I'm just having ideas now, and I'm letting the team run with those ideas.
Yeah.
So he's kind of making.
Yeah, about a year ago, I took my right-hand guy, Neil, I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, I think it's time that we hire a new CEO. And he just kind of looked at me and I said, I'm terrible at being a CEO. I'm a great hustle and grind CEO. I'm very visionary and have certain skill sets that are serving us well. But my ability as a day-to-day CEO was holding us back. And so we actually promoted him to CEO, and he's totally wired for it. And since we've done that, we've continued to grow. And so, and he has another coach that he works with, and she said to him, and this is not meant to like impress anybody or whatever, but this is how it's viewed. And a lot of times we don't get our ego out of the way. When he told his coach that I wanted him to be the CEO, her first response was, that takes a lot of humility on Tom's part. And I want to encourage you guys that the faster you can get your ego out of the way, to think that you have to have a hand in everything, the stronger and faster you're going to grow your company when you get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And one of the things you talk about quite a bit in your book, because you wrote a book. I won't use it here and plug it, but you wrote a book about the contract fight. And one of the things you talk about quite a bit, you got it right there. Of course,
You
I would
always have.
expect you to.
See, now you were talking about my set earlier. See, what I need to do is I need to put a shelf here now, and I got to put the book there.
Yeah.
So it sends a message. Hey, there's a book, right? And the next book I'm writing is called "Sell Unafraid." That'll be coming out later this year. Cool. Anyway, there you go. And guys, you can get the book free at thecontractorfight.com/book. Just pay for shipping and handling. So there you go. There, I just plugged it. Good. All right.
Yeah, good job. You do better than I do anyways. But you talk a lot about the concept of friendly fire, which is self-doubt, things like that. But do you mind elaborating on what you mean by friendly fire, and then any tips, tricks, advice you have to help people avoid it?
Most struggles that a contracting business has, any business for that matter, come down to a user error, owner error. Just what we were talking about a minute ago. Like if we don't truly have clarity, that's one way that we're shooting ourselves in the foot. If we don't have a vision, that's another way. If we're not consistent with the actions that we know, the daily process. A lot of people are focused on the results instead of the process of just each day. What are the non-negotiables today? So if you're in a sales role, you have a sales team, the worst thing you could do is judge your performance on what you sold today. You need to judge your performance on, did I control the things I had control over? I can't, put somebody in a chokehold and make them buy our stuff, buy the project or whatever you're selling. And so a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot because they don't have that focus on just what they have control over. They shoot themselves in the foot when they don't commit to becoming a student of business. I've always said if contractors would take 25% of the focus and effort they put into learning their craft or their trade into learning how to sell, learning their numbers, learning how to attract the right prospects, learning how to lead, if they would just do that, they'd be in a far different place than they are right now. And so there's, friendly fire is tolerating a certain employee that's bad for the culture because you need them out in the field. Right. And you're like, that's just Joe, and we just got to deal with Joe. Well, that's friendly fire that hurts the whole culture of the business. So I always encourage people just, and we all have these things. Like if I were to ask right now, what's something that that probably isn't real healthy for the business that you just continue to do because it's convenient? Because you don't have to have the hard conversation. You don't have to write a big check. You don't have to, and I've done this in the past where I've bought out partners. I've, because I knew that there was another level that we could go to, and it's not ripping on partners or anything like that. I love partnerships, but when we tolerate the things that we deep down really know, like, I talk a lot about, and it's funny how much pushback I get on this, but I talk about contractors all the time, especially up to a certain point, up to 5 million or so. If you're not getting a 50% gross profit on your work, meaning if you talked fences earlier, right? Like if installing the fence is going to cost you 10 grand, labor, material, permit, all that other garbage, whatever, charge at least 20. Like that simple concept. And contractors, they spend so much time trying to justify why they're special, why they're different, why they can't do that in their industry or their area. Our cost of living and, this little town in the middle of Nebraska is way lower than over here in Boston, where people can charge those prices. And the point is, guys, there's always regional differences in prices, but it doesn't mean that you can't get a 50% gross profit. Okay. Cause it's percentages. It's not about the dollar. If I sell that $20,000 fence for 20 grand here, but I can produce the fence at 15,000 in another area of the country because of the, cost of living and materials or whatever it might be, it's still 50%. And so, I think friendly fire is when we don't get out of our own way, like we talked about earlier. And, I think, in the sales process, friendly fire is when you think you know how to sell, and you think it's about being technical, and you think these things, but you fail to put in the reps and do sales role plays. Like, listen, man, if Justin, I don't golf, but if I golfed and I wanted to be a professional golfer, I need to do what professional golfers do, right? And that's like go to the range every day and I'm going to hit 500 balls today with my pitching wedge out of the sand or whatever it might be. That's reps. Well, if you're in business, you guys, you're a professional business owner, you're a professional salesperson, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, it's just the facts. And so, Friendly Fire is refusing to do what the professionals do. And so, I mean, I could go on for days of examples of Friendly Fire, but if you just stop repeating the stupid mistakes, you may be like, Friendly Fire is taking on a project that you're not familiar with. A lot of guys get hurt. A lot of guys take on a really big project. So here's an example. I had a guy, he's like, well, it's a really big, for him, it was a really big $200,000-$300,000 project. He's like, I can't bid this at 50% gross profit. Okay. And I'm like, well, dude, here's the problem. When you sell a big project and it books out a bunch of time, all right, there's scope creep. There's other elements of the project that are unforeseen conditions. There's weather delays. There's all these different things. And by the time you get through all that crap, you've gotten onto the other end. And if you sold the job at a 40, now you're producing it at a 28 or a 35% gross profit. You lost, you don't lose money, but you didn't, it's harder to hit your break even point now. And so there's all these different ways that we could talk Friendly Fire, but just, have that self-awareness around like, hey, because if I book a job for 2 months, that's a 35% gross profit for my company, for my only crew, that eliminates all this other high profit work that I could be doing. So a lot of guys get lulled into taking on these big projects and they get their butts kicked because they think they have to be competitive and they're just looking at the big dollar amount instead of looking at what they're going to keep at the end of the day.
Yeah. 100%. And you said a couple things earlier that I really liked. And you talked about like, what's that convenient thing people are doing? And I had someone tell me recently, which I thought was really interesting. They just said, hey, nothing burns out a good employee faster than watching you as the owner tolerate a bad one. So when you're trying to think like, hey, I think you used, I don't remember what name you used. We'll just use Jimmy for my example. If Jimmy's really dragging your crew and your productivity and your profitability down and you're letting them, Johnny, who might be an A+ employee, that's probably having a huge negative effect on him. So just be aware of like, even though it's convenient in some ways to do the easy thing by just ignoring stuff and not taking actions, the ripple effect is going to cause more problems, which you're then going to have to address. And it's just going to keep going and going and going. So like Tom said, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Do the stuff you need to do. It literally just makes everything easier, makes you more profitable, makes you more efficient, makes you more happy. Because a lot of the things that Tom preaches are ways to get you your work-life balance and just give you the life you want, not just the job you want. So now,
real quick, let me elaborate on that real quick, because I want to give you guys a real example of what that looks like. Many years ago, in the early 2000s, running a painting business at the time, we had my partner and I had 12 field employees, 12 painters in the field, and these guys were holding us hostage. All right, or a portion of them were, 7 of them were, to be exact. I'm not going to work with this crew leader. I'm not going to, is that whole game that if you've been in the trades more than a week and you have an employee or something, you know what I'm talking about, right? And there was this project that we were doing on a Saturday. We had to finish it. We were stripping a bar in somebody's basement to restain and, varnish it or whatever. And the crew leader told one of the guys, hey, it's dark in that corner. Go out to the van and get a work light so you can see better. And the guy goes, I can see just fine. And he's like, I appreciate that you can see just fine. And the crew leader is like the most gentle, tactful guy on the fucking planet, right? Pardon my French. And so he wouldn't go get the light. Something this stupid, right? Wouldn't go get the light. And this was on the tail end of just this period of time where these guys just were trying to run the company. And I went out to this job site on Monday where we had the whole crew, all 12 people were on this project. We needed to bang it out, whatever. And I go out there and I call out the guy that wouldn't get the light. He comes outside. I said, hey, and the crew leader was there. I said, hey, man, Jose said that you didn't get the light. He's like, no. And I'm like, well, there's a reason he's the crew leader. he's responsible for the job and the customer and the managing of and the hours and the quality and all these other things. You need to help him do his job. Long story short, he refused to do it. He literally said to me, if you want me to listen to him, you need to pay me more money. And I said, well, then it looks like you can get your tools and go home because you don't work here anymore. And I fired him. We call this Black Monday in our company. He walks inside. Somebody else comes outside and says, hey, if you get rid of him, I'm leaving too. I said, okay, you're leaving too. You're fired. Okay. I felt like fucking Donald Trump on The Apprentice or whatever, man. And I didn't take joy in this, but I'm like, I'm taking control back. And so another guy, I swear to God, another guy comes out and goes, well, the second guy you fired, he's my ride. And so if he goes, I go. And then a couple other guys came out that were like brothers, and they're like, hey, we don't really want to quit, but if they're going, he's married to my sister-in-law. And it was like they were, and I don't, I'd like to have sex again in my marriage, so I'm going to quit too, because I don't want my wife pissed at me because I didn't have his back. I mean, dude, by the time all was said and done, I had fired 7 of our 12 employees in a 20-minute period. It was like rapid fire, man. It was like crazy. And they leave. I pull the other 5 together who were actually the kick-ass employees that made us money. I said, hey, I know we've had a rough go here the last half hour or so. I said, but I want you guys to know I appreciate you. You all have a 20% raise as of right now. We'll backdate it to the start of this pay period. And we're stronger now than we've ever been. And dude, in the next couple weeks, literally in the next 2 weeks, we produced more profit with the right 5 than the wrong 12, right? I called my business partner. I said, from the job site, I said, hey, I got good news and I got bad news. He says, well, what's the good news? I said, I've taken back control of the company. He says, well, what's the bad news? I said, we only got 5 guys left. And so sometimes here's the thing. We knew for months that this was an issue, and this was friendly fire. Think about how much profit we cost ourselves because the right 5 were having attitudes to the wrong 7, to your point. And so guys, if your spidey sense is tingling in any way, shape, or form right now about any move you got to make in your business, take some time, write it out, think about it a little bit for maybe a half an hour, maybe a day, whatever you need. And then when you come to the conclusion that you just got to cut ties or whatever, just make it happen as fast as you can. I've done this in every business I've owned, and it sucks. You never like it. We even had it here in the fight within the last year. We just had, we had a couple people that weren't carrying their water the way we needed them to. And this goes all the way back to why I talk about your values a lot. My core values in our company are literally my core values as a human being. Okay. And so, one of ours is earn confidence. To me, that means like every day you got to show up and pay the rent. Every day I got to show up every day and pay the rent. Every day I got to come, because what I did yesterday doesn't matter. This is back to the top where companies plateau. You get seduced by your success. You think you can just phone it in today. And I have zero respect for people that have a half-ass work ethic and all those things. And so I can't tolerate those things in myself or in the team. Now, it also works 2 ways. When you create this sort of a culture, I've had periods of my life running my businesses and the fight and this and that where, Neil, our CEO, he'll tap me on the shoulder. In fact, it was probably about a month ago. He calls me up. He says, hey, I think you need to take some time off. And I was like, why? And he goes, you're not yourself lately. He's like, you need to go recharge, because I've been pushing hard, man. I've just been, I have one gear, right? So he's like, I want you to take 3 weeks off and just disappear and have zero contact with the company. And I said, what the hell am I going to do for 3 weeks? Right. And so I compromised and I took a week off, or I'm taking a week off. We're going to Cabo here in a couple weeks, but my wife and I, but they have to also have the freedom to call you out when you're not yourself. And when you can create that sort of an environment where everyone, and it's not like they're pissed at you or you're pissed at them. It's just like, hey, we're better than this. Let's go. And I've had some distractions, nothing like catastrophic, but there was just some things that I think I was starting to meddle too much in some things. I mentioned earlier that I'm letting go of the sales role and this and that. And I think people were like, will you just go away and let us do our thing, and get out of my sandbox here for a little bit. So that your team also, you need to create that environment where they have the freedom to tell you the truth as well.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That leads back to a company culture. And you mentioned values. If your company doesn't have, and I think most people agree with this, but I'll just say it, if your company doesn't have a mission statement, company values, if they don't understand the ethics of the owners, like that stuff has to be crystal clear, because it's just going to funnel through them to your end all be all customers. And it's going to make a huge difference in the both performance, branding, everything of your company, right? Because branding, whether it's your marketing presence or just what people think of when they hear your name. Like Tom, you have a very specific brand. When I hear your name, I think of certain things. It makes sense to me. But then there's other people who, aren't necessarily perceived the right way. And it's just because of self-inflicted actions in some cases and whatnot. Now, you talked about something just a second ago that I want to sidebar onto about margins, right? Margins is something we talk about all the time. It's something we're passionate about with our client base. And it's something where we just see people completely explode for the better when they start, quote unquote, I'll steal another term of yours, don't mean to, but it's just what's coming into my head right now, charging what they're worth. Because there's a lot of people who do fantastic work. They're really good at what they do, and they're trying to compete or charge less than people who are trunk slammers, have no certifications. They're just not professional, right? So how you say you get that a lot, and you get a lot of pushback. A lot of people will push back on 50% gross margin on projects, right? I have a lot of people say, I wouldn't touch a project for less than 40 ever with a target of 50, right? Those people are also the most successful people I know in their trades. Like, how do you help people overcome that? Is there a silver bullet? Is there a piece of advice? Is there, I know there's probably not one, but I'm just kind of curious your overall thoughts on, because there's a lot of people listening right now who are going to say, there's no way I can't do it. I live in Kansas, where there's 20 customers in my city. Like I can't, I have to figure something out. Like, how do you help people overcome that as a business coach?
Well, your location has nothing to do with your gross profit margin. Okay. Because back to the city with 20 people in it. All right. The cost of living is going to be lower there than it is in a major city or something, but it doesn't mean you still can't. And guys, to get a 50% gross profit, if a guy costs you $30 an hour with his wage in the field and his labor burden and all that stuff, if it's 30 an hour, charge at least 60 an hour for that person. Okay. Then when you finish the job on time, the other $30 is called gross profit. That goes down to pay your overhead and have a net profit. So it doesn't matter where you live, first and foremost. But the way we get people to buy in inside our Battleground group right away is we start having them job cost their projects. Most contractors don't job cost. It's like, a football team plays the game today. Tomorrow they come in, they stretch, they ice, and they watch the game film from the day before, and they correct their mistakes, and then they gear up for the next opponent. And that's what job costing is. I was in the Marine Corps. You do a patrol, you do a mission, you come back and you do a debrief, an after action report. Like, what happened? What did we learn? Blah, blah, blah. And so, number one, start job costing. If you want a real slap in the face, sometimes that does it. Next is this. I'm asking the audience right now, would you rather do $1 million at a 35% gross profit, which would leave 350 grand, or would you rather do 800,000 at 50%, which leaves you $400,000? So don't get enticed by the big numbers. I'm all for big numbers, but let's make sure that before we're scaling to bigger numbers that we are as profitable as we can be. Because here's the other thing. Let me grab I'm a calculator guy. So if my average job is say $12,000 at $1 million, I got to do 83 projects if it's at a 35% gross profit, right? Where at 800,000, I only have to do 60, 67 projects somewhere in there. So 20 less jobs, which is going to mean probably 40 or 50 less leads that I need, which is also going to mean a lot of guys right now think they need more employees in the field. when the real issue is they're just not profitable enough. They're not charging enough. And so, and then that comes back to your sales skills, your marketing skills, your sales skills. So not to like sit here and sound like I'm an infomercial for Battleground, but in Battleground, we teach it's built on three main pillars. We got 400 and something contractors in it now and this and that are killing it. It's confidence in numbers. When you have confidence in your numbers, you know what you need to charge. You really know what it costs you every day to just be in business. I'm not even talking make a profit. Okay. Once you have confidence in your numbers, then we teach you how to sell unafraid, to sell at those higher margins, to connect with your prospects and your clients in ways nobody else will. And then the third is now we're going to pour gas on your marketing and help you attract more of the ideal clients. And those three things I call the big three is the foundation. And once that's nailed, then you can think about scaling bigger and this and that. And there will come a time, there might come a point in time where, I mean, our painting company, we produced it when we were smaller, it was a 50 to 60% gross profit. Once I learned the power of that, we found that we got to a certain size that if we could produce in the field at a 42 to a 45%, that was kind of a sweet spot for us, and it worked well and we made the money. But it also depends on how much your overhead is and things like that. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but so you need less guys, you need less leads, you need less jobs to do when your gross profit is higher. And I always say, 50% gross profit for 90% of the contractors that are hearing this is going to be the fastest way for you to make more money. And the biggest obstacle to you doing that is what's between your ears right now, because you don't think it's possible, because you have your own money mindset baggage and you think you have to give a crap about what the going rate is. And you don't. All right, here we go. Last thing I'll say on this. Most contractors don't know their numbers. And when I say most, like 90%. Okay. 90%. I am dumbfounded, and I was one of them, by the ignorance of the contracting world when it comes to the math of owning a business. So if 90%, and I say 90%, I've been doing this a long time. We've coached thousands of people. All right. Every single company I've ever started working with in group coaching, one-on-one coaching, workshops, I do whatever it is, when we start putting their numbers up on the whiteboard, okay, 100% of the time, they weren't right when they came to us. So if you just go, all right, if I've got 10 main competitors in my area and 9 of them don't know their numbers, why would I give a shit what the going rate is? And I always say that the only numbers I care about are my numbers, because you don't know. I had a competitor who was always cheaper than me, and I thought he was lowballing me. And he wasn't. What was happening was I didn't know the whole context of his life and his business behind the scenes. We ended up going to the same church, and I saw him there this many years ago. And I said, man, I got to ask you, man, every time I go up against you, like you're 20%, 30% less than me and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Like, what's the deal? His wife was a surgeon making $300,000 a year. Okay. He told me he had like super low overhead, and he took all the profits from his business and he just put it in their retirement account, because his goal was to just use his painting business, which was $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million a year, whatever it was. But he didn't have to eat from the business. There was a different, you know what I'm saying? There was a different story. So for you to, and that worked for him, and that met his goals, and they were able to invest and bank, $100,000, $150,000 a year, like clockwork, for 20 years. And he's multimillionaire today and all this other stuff because his wife made a shit ton of money and could, support the family. And that's the plan that they created, is they started the business to be an investment vehicle. So you don't know the story, is my point. So, and now he knew his numbers. Other people, most don't. So mind your business, mind your own business, right? Focus on you, what you can control, level up your skills as a marketer, as a communicator, as a salesperson, and ignore the going rate.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice, because I read a book not too long ago about like ideal customers and making sure that like the work you do is the work you should be doing. It's called the Pumpkin Plan. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It talks about really just paring down your scope to,
it's Mike
to your stuff that
McAllowitz.
makes you money.
And we just
Yeah.
did a workshop 3 weeks ago with Mike in Florida. We had him do a workshop for our community. So yeah, he's been on my show a few times. He's a great guy. But yeah,
Had
there you
no
go,
idea,
man.
to be honest. But yeah, I read his books, so
That's
you can
right.
tell him I read it. And I don't read a lot of books,
Mm-hmm.
so that's pretty decent. But yeah, just kind of moving forward. I know I've kept you a couple minutes over our 30-minute window. I'm sure the listeners are highly appreciating everything you're giving. But is there any really just kind of last little growth hack tips or something that you're really focusing on today that you're seeing is making a difference, or any sort of little nugget you can send the folks home with? And I'll preface it by saying I know that that's tough because a lot
I
of your
don't
big
know
process.
everyone's situation, right? So if I have a blanket statement, it would be this, and it's just, I'll use a sales example. Okay, this is just easy. And here's the concept that I train in our workshops and stuff. Do not, or let's minimize what I call mediocre days. Okay, so again, math problem. And by the way, every problem you have in your business, every level of success that you want to get to in your business is just a math problem. Okay, and so, for instance, if your sales goal, and I don't care if let's just say you're a one-man show right now. Okay, you're a one-man show, meaning you're the only salesperson. You got a team in the field producing, and you can field the leads and you can go sell. If you have a sales team, then multiply the math I'm about to give you by however many people are on your sales team. So, say you have a $2 million sales goal. There's about 262-ish sales days a year. You take out weekends and whatever, right? So that means on average, you got to be bringing in like $7,600 a day. What we found is most people, when I say what we found, it's through over a decade of doing this and coaching people and digging into the numbers and whatever, is there's about 2 days a week on average that most people have that I call mediocre days. Okay. Where they're not prospecting. They're not, staying in touch with past customers. They're not upselling. They're not closing a deal, whatever it is. And back to the actions, right? The daily actions. I'm, a lot of sales training. We do a lot of sales training around closing. When I do my workshops, it's about being a hunter. It's about taking advantage of the opportunities. It's not being, it's not being a little baby bird in the nest waiting to be fed, right? It's go out there and find your food. And so that 2 days a week in 50 weeks is about 100 days a year. So those mediocre days are costing you about $760,000 a year. Okay. So if you want to move faster, if you want to be more profitable, if you want to hit your goals, just minimize, back to the friendly fire, minimize the mediocre days, performance days that you have or that you tolerate in your company with your sales team or with your operations. So apply this to any area of your business. But I leave you with this. What would your business look like, you guys, if you cut your mediocre days in half on your crew, meaning they're just not all in? And I don't mean they're bad people. I just mean, we've allowed the standard to dip. We haven't set some daily non-negotiables. We haven't, we half-assed pre-planning a job, and now we lost 4 or 5 percentage points on the production of the project, and that's real money. So whatever area of your business, imagine if everybody showed up and you just minimized the mediocre days, starting with you. Okay. And now what this looks like practically is if you say you're going to have a company meeting operations meeting or whatever it is every week, all right, where you're going to go over, hey, how do we do on these jobs? Here's jobs that are coming up. We do 15 minutes of training and you're consistent with it. Mediocre days means, this week, we're all spread out with job sites all over. So we're going to skip the meeting this week. Okay. It's those little things, those winning the moments decisions, I call them, that compound in one direction or another over time. And so I'd say that would be the biggest thing, is just step back and go, where am I allowing us to not be at our best every day? And, a question I always like to ask people is, if we had a conversation with your actions over the last 30 days, what would we learn about you? Okay. And ask that of yourself. If we really had a conversation with my actions over the last 30 days, would my actions support all the things I say I want and that are important to me, and my vision and my goals And most times, listen, let's just be honest. Most people, as you're intentional about this, you're going to look back and go, yeah, not my best. Okay. Now you might be working hard. Okay. I'm not saying you're not working hard, but might be, it's like putting a ladder on the wrong wall and working hard to climb to the top. That's that's stupid. Make sure it's on the right wall, and start with one thing. It could be sales. It could be gross. When I first started learning all these things 20 years ago, like about gross profit, I know we talked a lot about this. We made it our mission in 1 year, my partner and I, all we focused on was being excellent in our gross profit. And that alone put another couple $100 in the bottom line, couple $100,000 in the bottom line within a 12-month period, okay, on less volume. Okay. So I don't know about you guys, but if I could do less jobs, have less people, make more money, let's get that strong. And then we can, grow the business. I hate the word scale because it's overused, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very fair. Yeah. So just to kind of wrap things up here, don't forget to grab the handouts from the right. We do have some, great educational material and stuff on there too. We'll make sure that we link all of Tom's stuff in case you guys want to learn more about a lot of the stuff that he does. And the webinar today was presented by ArcSight as per usual, leading mobile CAD drawing app for field users, focus a lot on the home services construction business. If it's something you want to learn more about, we'll make sure we link that as well in any of the comment sections and things so you can snag to us easy. Otherwise, it's just arcsite.com. If you have any questions, my name's Justin. You can reach out to me directly. Tom and his team are always available for people as well. And Tom, I just want to thank you again for hopping on today and sharing all your insight and wisdom and all the tips and tricks that I'm sure everybody at home is eager to put to use.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, no, thanks a ton. Thanks everybody for attending, and y'all have a great rest of your day.